We're going to hold off on approving the minutes because literally those were sent out 15 minutes ago and you may or may not have had a chance to look at them. But we'll go right to the first item, proponents for a minimum number of votes when there are not enough candidates on the ballot for available slots. Carl and Phyllis Luck are here. We distributed...
Public comment?
Sorry, is there any public comment? Any public comment?
Just double checking.
Thank you. Good. Okay. We distributed, previously we distributed, Carl, your entire memo, but for tonight we distributed just the language, and the proposed language is, no person who is a write-in candidate for election to town office, if no candidate's name is printed on the ballot, therefore, shall be deemed to be elected unless they receive a number of votes at least equal to the number of signatures which would be required by law to place their name on the ballot at such election as a candidate as aforesaid. This came to us before when we were doing the hearing in April. We voted not to do it. When we went back and going back through everything, we're opening up discussion on all the topics again. Everybody here said we were willing to consider it again.
Great,
So.
I appreciate that. We truly believe this change will benefit the community and its residents. We did get some feedback that it wasn't clear or explicit enough, so we checked with town council, and he came up with a revision that makes it a tad clearer, and he just got back to us today with that.
So look, I'll read it. No person who is a write-in candidate for election to town office, if no candidate's name is printed on the ballot, therefore, shall be deemed to be elected unless he or she receives a number of votes at least equal to the number of signatures which would be required by law to place his or her name on the ballot at such election as a candidate aforesaid. For any town office with multiple vacancies, the foregoing restriction shall apply unless the number of candidates' names printed on the ballot is equal to or greater than the number of vacancies. So that last sentence deals with when we have multi-member boards, and we often have two people running for that multi-member board at one time. That type of thing.
I think town council's making it more explicit is positive.
And just to let people know, the approximate number, this relates to the number of votes cast in the last gubernatorial election, and it's a percentage, and currently that requirement is about 42 votes, 42 signatures to get on the ballot. That may change from time to time as that goes up, but that's the current requirement, which is not a huge number at this point. Comments from the commission, the charter committee?
I'm trying to parse that last sentence.
So am I.
So school committee has, each year you'll have two people running, and then there may be 1 year where you have one person running.
Yeah.
So the year when you have two people running,
Still one vacancy.
no,
No, two
two
people
vacancies.
running for
vacancies.
So this is when there's two vacancies.
Two vacancies.
So if you only had one person running for two positions, this would require that a write-in candidate to be elected for the other position would have to get at least 42 votes to be considered elected.
Okay.
Okay.
Which is the same.
Right, it doesn't apply to the person who's on the ballot.
Right,
Right.
because
Because two votes would...
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Cover the person on the
That's
ballot.
right. Well, theoretically, somebody on the ballot could have died. People chose not to vote for that person. And as long as the write-in candidate's got more than 42 votes, it's okay for the second one, but not the first one. The issue that we have in town is that when there's two vacancies on a board, and if you remember from any charter meeting, you don't run for this position or this position, you run for both of them, and the top two get the vote. So
Right.
you can't run against one versus the other person.
Okay.
So the way I'm reading this, the first part about multiple vacancies really is not even needed. The foregoing restrictions shall apply unless the number of candidates' names printed is equal to or greater than the number of vacancies. The first part of that sentence really doesn't sound needed to me.
I know it's
If
public.
you have one vacancy or one position to fill, this would apply to that.
If there's nobody on that.
If there's nobody else on it. Well, but if somebody's on it, then
Then it doesn't
It
apply
has
at
to
all.
apply.
then it doesn't apply, right?
It has to be written twice because this is an exception for multiple vacancies.
Yeah.
I'm
And then
just,
it says, you do what it says before unless.
okay, so basically, if 3 people are running, and then there's a write-in, and the write-in gets more votes than somebody else on the ballot, but it's less than 42, they get the position. That's how I'm reading this.
The write-in is with less, yeah, that's right, yeah.
So the write-in wins even though they don't hit the threshold.
Because there are names on the ballot equal
Okay.
to the openings.
The theory
Equal
being
to or
is
greater
that,
than the openings.
the theory being is that the public has notice of, here are some candidates that are running,
Okay,
and that's in advance, because they're on the ballot. If there's a write-in candidate, then that person has to do a campaign against that other person, and the town votes. If there's no vacancy, we've had 2, 3, 4 votes, up to 10, 15 votes, and that person gets elected, because there is no restriction at the moment.
So if we have 2 vacancies, one name is on the ballot, the other one is a write-in, this does not apply.
No, it does. The second, the last sentence
So they would
says,
still have to get the 40.
they would have to get 42, right,
Right.
because they weren't voting against somebody.
yeah.
But if it's empty and no one is running,
They still
They
have
have
to
to
get
Still have to
42.
get 42.
just making sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not a huge, so what happens if somebody does not get 42 votes?
Certainly be a lot clearer.
Well, the trouble with this is,
Ready to compute if you want to sit here.
when we hear about ranked choice voting, this is going to come up again when we talk about multi-member board. So if somebody does not get the 42 votes, and there is not somebody running for that position, then that is considered a position that's not filled, is declared not elected. And then what happens is the remaining members of the board that they're running for and the Board of Selectmen will jointly meet to elect the person until the next town meetings,
To appoint,
next
right?
town
To
election.
appoint.
To appoint, yeah, they don't elect. They appoint until the next election.
But it's on an agenda, so people know ahead of time if they have anything to say.
Yeah.
We had it, that.
Yeah, and it's advertised, they're required that it's advertised in the ledger, so. Other comments from,
So the residents are aware.
public comment?
Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. My only question is in the description that you just gave as to what happens if he doesn't get the required number of votes, is that that particular person goes through the appointing process, but you also said the position's advertised.
So to be very clear, so you have the election, they get 41 votes.
Okay.
They're not considered elected,
Right?
that's considered a vacancy.
Mm-hmm.
It's required that that vacancy be advertised, and anybody can apply for that position.
Okay.
Even the person who did the write-in, but other people can write too. There's not a
Right.
guarantee that they're going to get it.
That's just slightly different than the way you described it. Thank you for clarifying.
That's the new thing.
It does have, and that's in here somewhere that it has to be advertised? Because I thought we had that 30-day thing, but then that's appointed
That's appointed,
committees.
right.
So for elected committees, when there's a vacancy, there's,
There's also in the bylaws, a charter, one or the other.
Yeah, it's equal.
Is there an additional handout?
Yes, this just came out. That was provided by town council to reordered the wording and added the last sentence.
The only difference, I guess, is pretty much the last sentence is added.
We reordered things a little too. So, do we have any members that does not support this?
Seems reasonable to me.
Okay. So, this is technically not on the agenda to vote, but that's an indication of where we're going at this point. So I think that clarifying how to actually deal with the multi-member board and the language that will go through it. There'll be additional review by town council for consistency with other things like that, so it may change a little bit, but we'll certainly let you know if that's going to be the case.
Okay, thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you. You're welcome to stay for the meeting, or you're welcome to leave. Well, I got a flat tire to deal with.
Yeah, the only remaining question I have is there a reason why it's referred to as town office and not town board or committee?
I guess the question is... how
Well,
does
if
it-
it's elected, right?
For election to town office.
So we're just talking about elected positions.
If we go to elected...
So it would be considered a term of office?
Yeah, actually, so the 3.1 under elected officials, the town offices to be filled by ballot.
Okay.
So that's
That's why it
says town office, elected town
Okay.
officers.
Thank you.
That's why we keep rereading these to understand it. Good. Okay. The next presentation is going to be with some proponents for minimum number of, for ranked choice voting. And we have a presentation tonight that's going to be multimedia. And,
Do I need to move?
You can do that,
Yeah.
If you let us.
You do. Sergeant?
Here. You want to hand this out?
He's got it covered, he knows.
This is our report on using ranked choice voting for local elections. Here's some business cards. If you want to take one, if you have any follow-up questions, you can take one and contact me afterwards.
There it is, yeah.
These kind of lights on.
I don't know how much.
I don't know.
How long you want me to go into this? I can go to various lengths. I'll try to keep it quick.
Well, let's see what the screen looks like first, because we may need to kill a light or two.
I heard there was a big tonight.
Baseball.
Looks good to you?
Oh, yeah, because I'm right in front of it.
Yeah, for us though, the light
I think it's
glare.
this big.
Yeah.
So, yeah, before we get started, just real quick, so thanks, first of all, for inviting Greg and myself to come down. Just a little context, it's really exciting to hear that Lunenburg is thinking about considering this for the charter. It was great to hear the charter committee was considering that. Just so Greg can, sort of tailor the presentation to what the review committee is looking to, is most interested in learning about tonight. What would you say the focus is on the committee? Is it learning about what it is, or do you have specific questions?
I think generic. We had some earlier this year. We had some generic discussions about it. In light of the congressional election, that primary where there were 19 or 18 Democrats running for position, and when the people were saying, if I get 19%, I'm going to be able to win, doesn't quite seem right. We also, last year, this wasn't a stimulus, but there were 3 candidates running for selectman last year for one position. Wouldn't begin to project if the results were changed as a result of that. And I can't even remember whether Katie received more than 50% of the vote. So that we have a local example as well as the congressional. So just trying to get to understanding of what this possibly is and whether it's the right time for Lunenburg to consider it now or something in the future.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Bob.
Great. And I assume there's some people in the room that want a little refresher about what it is.
Yeah, and you're also on TV, so this gets to show
Okay,
the
great.
audience, not live, but we'll be there.
Just a little background on Voter Choice Massachusetts. We're a nonpartisan, politically diverse group educating people about electoral reforms that increase the range of choice in the ballot and produce fairer outcomes. Just to reiterate what the problem is, one of the examples we use a lot is the 2000 presidential election, particularly in the 2000 presidential election in Florida, as people still remember this election. The result in that election was incredibly close, 48.85% to 48.84% of the vote, a difference of 537 votes. So incredibly close. You might also remember that these weren't the only 2 candidates in the race. There was, in fact, a third candidate, Ralph Nader, who got nearly 100,000 votes. It was much bigger than 537. And a lot of people asked the question after this race, well, who would have won had Ralph Nader not been in this race? And in fact, there were exit polls done that asked this question of Nader supporters as they left the voting booth. And 45% of them said they would have voted for Gore, 27% would have voted for Bush, and 28% would not have voted at all. They wouldn't have shown up. Well, we can do that math. We can take 45% of the 97,000, 27% of the 97,000, and estimate what might have happened had he not been in the race. You see, there might have been a 17,000 vote swing in favor of Al Gore, and he may have won the state of Florida and won the 2000 presidential election. Because of this, Nader's been called the spoiler in this race, the idea being that he split this majority that wanted somebody other than Bush. This happens to both sides. In 2012, there was a congressional race in the 6th district with a Democrat, a Republican, and a Libertarian candidate. And again, the result was very close, about 1 percentage point between the Democrat and the Republican, and the Libertarian with about 5% of the vote, close to 5% of the vote. And again, people ask, well, what would have happened had Dan Fishman not been in this race? The argument being that he arguably split the vote, the majority that did not want John Tierney. If you remember anything about this race, Tierney was in kind of a scandal. His wife was involved in some sort of offshore gambling thing. And in fact, the Eagle Tribune the following day came out with this editorial: Libertarians play spoilers in 2 big races. Certainly Fishman's smaller government political ideology is close to the Republican platform than the Democratic platform. It's safe to assume that had Fishman not been in the race, the bulk of his votes would have floated to Sasse. So here we see the problem affecting both sides. And of course we have the 3rd Congressional, you might be familiar with. The top 2 vote getters getting 21.7% and 21.6% of the vote, respectively. 127 vote difference. So 40,000 voters, all those that did not vote for Trahan or Co., did not get a say between the top 2 frontrunners in this race, of which one they preferred the most, so we don't know. What's the solution? Well, that's what we have here, ranked choice voting. Simple description is it lets you, in today's system, in most elections you go in and vote for 1 candidate. In most elections, in local races you may vote for 2, select board, school committee and so on, but most elections you vote for 1 candidate. And ranked choice voting, instead of voting for 1 candidate, lets you rank candidates in order of preference. First choice, second choice, third choice. Here's a ballot from Santa Fe where it was used in their last mayoral election. They had 5 candidates on the ballot, and you can mark your first choice in the first column, second choice in the second column, third choice, and so on, just like a standardized test you may have taken in school. It's used in a variety of cities. This is just one example city where it's used. And the way it's counted, or the way the votes are counted, it requires the winner gets a majority of the vote, more than 50% of the vote to win. So we don't have elections, ranked choice voting elections, where somebody is winning with 21% of the vote. You have to get more than 50% to win. This is how it's counted. This is how we get to that majority. It's a instant runoff process. Here's an example. In this race, we have 4 candidates, 2 orangey candidates, 2 purpley candidates. You can consider these kind of ideologies or demographics or parties similar candidates to one another. And what we first do is we take all those ballots and we just count the first choices. And so in this example, the orange candidate has 55, the strong orange candidate has 55% of the first choices, the strong purple 30%, the weak purple 10%, and the weak orange 5% of the vote. In this case, one candidate has a majority, has more than 50%, so that candidate wins and we're done, just like today. The difference comes when no candidate gets a majority. Here's an example where the winning candidate under today's system would be the strong orange candidate with only 40% of the vote, not a majority. Ranked choice voting says, wait a second, we're not done. No candidate has a majority here. So what happens now is we eliminate the last place candidate, the weak orange candidate. everybody who voted for that candidate first on that ranked ballot you saw has their vote instead counted towards their second choice, their backup choice. In this example, for the purposes of simplicity, every single person that voted for weak orange first voted for strong orange second. It won't be quite that uniform in practice, but it'll be roughly like that. And if that were true, then when we recount the votes, strong orange has increased her lead to 45%, but still does not have the majority. So we repeat, the weakest candidate is eliminated, the weak purple at 20%. And again, for simplicity, we'll assume everybody that voted for weak purple first voted for strong purple second. And so now all of those ballots count towards the strong purple candidate. And strong purple wins with a majority of the vote, would not have won under today's system. And this is, as you can see, this is fair because a majority of the public, more people wanted to go in a purpley direction than they wanted to go in an orange direction. And we were able to capture that by doing these runoffs. So that's how it's counted. It has big positive impacts for campaign. Yeah.
Any questions about the counting part?
Yeah, any questions about this? I'll pause so far.
So the counting happens by the computer?
Yeah, it all happens instantly. So for
It's a bubble reader.
bubble reader.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for this, it will be tabulated in seconds.
If you, in the third round there,
Yeah.
the first round weak orange still goes wherever it goes. You just take the
Everybody
second
that
round,
voted for this candidate,
you still take their second place.
yeah, they get their second choices.
Then you go with the lowest candidate and then their second place.
Yeah, their second places.
Thank you.
And if their second choice were eliminated around, we'd look to their third choice, if they had. It has a very positive impact on campaign civility. This has actually been measured. Why is that? I don't know if any of you have ever been canvassing on behalf of a candidate before, but well, let me back up and say, it's used in a couple cities. So in San Francisco, in one of the very first races it was used, the East Bay Times reported, with the new system in place, candidates for the San Francisco Board of Supervisors have been campaigning together, trying to win the goodwill of each other's supporters. In Minneapolis, where it's also used, a local paper wrote, it was a remarkably positive campaign. Candidates said they didn't want to alienate each other's supporters for fear of losing out on second choice votes. At the end of their final debate, they even sang Kumbaya. So you could think of where we are today with incivility and mudslinging politics and where they have gone in the city of Minneapolis with their politics under ranked choice. Why is that? Well, if you've ever been canvassing for a candidate, let's say you're canvassing for, going door knocking for candidate purple, and you come to a house that has a sign for candidate orange in the yard, what do you do? In today's system, most people would say, well, I'm just going to the next house, I'm leaving. I'm going to the next house, there's no way I'm going to get that person to vote for the purple candidate. They are very committed to orange. Under ranked choice voting, what do? You go to the door and you have a conversation. You say, I know you're supporting orange first, but candidate purple deserves your second choice. You find common ground with this person. And the last thing you do is throw mud and denigrate them. So it flips the incentives on their head in terms of whether you go low or you go high in campaigning. The progress for this reform across the country. So in 1998, there was one city in the United States using it. That was Cambridge, Massachusetts. Today, there are about a dozen cities and 3 or 4 more coming online in the next few years. So we have close to, in one state, I should say, the state of Maine, that was the big news. In 2016, passed ranked choice voting, became the first state to do so for both all state and federal offices in Maine. So Maine enacted ranked choice voting in 2016. They used it in their primary in June, and they're going to use it again in a few days, in November, for their general election. It's used all around the world, Ireland, Australia, Scotland, New Zealand. It's used in a lot of colleges and universities, including many here in Massachusetts, MIT, Harvard, Tufts, etc. It's used for the Academy Awards. It's used for a variety of professional organizations, including the American Political Science Association. Our organization has been growing very, very quickly in terms of making this reform known. We have lots of volunteers, lots of members now, and lots of regional chapters around the state spreading the word in talks like this to various groups. In September of last year, the Amherst Charter Commission, this might be relevant to you, added ranked choice voting to their new charter. So they are making a transition from a town to a city form of government, and they decided ranked choice voting is what they wanted to do, and that was enacted. And they'll be rolling that out soon. We've had a couple bills in the state legislature last session. We're going to have a more aggressive effort this coming session, including the local option bill that will make it a little easier for cities and towns like Lunenburg to adopt it. You wouldn't have to, under the local option bill, you wouldn't have to do the home rule petition. You could just enact it by a bylaw. And these bills have had some prominent local sponsors, including Jennifer Benson, Stephen Hay, and Jennifer Flanagan. I know Jennifer Flanagan is not in the state senate anymore, but she supported it. And in this coming session, we'll be reaching out again to your reps and to whoever is your state senator after November. Variety of endorsers and supporters, organizations, and well-known people. We had a big editorial in favor of ranked choice in the Boston Globe in August that we were very happy about. And in fact, they came back with another editorial after the primary focusing on CD3 and the need for ranked choice voting because of races like CD3. That's it. So that's the primer on ranked choice. That's a variety of a talk that we give all around the state. Talking about ranked choice generally for both state offices and for local offices, and this report you have delves a little bit deeper into the case for local offices. Let me stop there and stop talking for a little bit and see what questions you have how it will work here.
Two comments. One, the folks from Board of Choice went to the Democratic State Convention and the Republican State Convention, and they received lots of interest from both parties. So as was said, this is not a partisan thing, because either side could be a benefit on that.
Yeah.
And the other thing just to note is that people are not required to rank all candidates. They still can choose to put somebody as a single number one, or they could even put somebody as a number two. So people still have choices to only vote once for a candidate. Changes how things, what happens is if their candidate that they really want to get in is not number one, they're not going to be counted in that process.
But unlike local races today, you may have had a multi-winner, you have a lot of multi-winner races at the town level. You may have bullet voted before, because you said, I'm only going to give my vote to the top choice, because if I vote for my second choice, that second choice may beat my first choice. So in a lot of the multi-winner elections we have in the local level today, people are strategically trying to bullet vote or game out how many of their choices they should vote for. Under ranked choice voting, that's not an issue. It's never the case that your second choice hurts your first choice. So if you do have a second preference, it is in your interest to rank it. So it takes away this whole bullet voting gaming thing that happens in multi-winner races.
Okay, I'm mostly just struck by the irony that we just heard from somebody talking about how many write-ins we need for votes for offices that don't have anybody running. So I guess my question would be, if we were to do this, we would only have the authority to do this for local.
That's correct.
So
Yes.
not any of the statewide offices.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, that's all that's in Lunenburg's authority. Like, there's a separate statewide campaign that's working on the state passing legislation to consider adopting ranked choice voting for state and federal offices in Massachusetts. So you're absolutely right. Lunenburg doesn't have jurisdiction over controlling how Lunenburgers vote for those offices, but they're just voter choice. Like what this organization is most active in is really advocating adoption at the state level. And where we get interest at the local level, we're happy to support, towns with information about how they can pursue it as well.
And if the state pursued it at state level, that would only affect statewide offices.
Correct, except they could pass a local option to make it easier for cities and towns, but they couldn't instruct or force a city or town.
Which could then be done by bylaw instead of by charter.
Right.
What did Maine have?
Maine first had it for the city of Portland. The city of Portland used ranked choice, but then they statewide enacted it for all state and federal offices, primaries, and general elections.
But not locals.
No, the ballot question didn't force localities to do anything, but there's more cities and towns there that are become more interested in it now.
Once they see it happen.
Yeah.
In Massachusetts, technically, the legislature could require locals to do it because they have absolute authority over all cities and towns, but they traditionally won't in elections. And to your point, when we have a town election that says town election, when there's a president or a state senator, like that's technically a state election. So there really are two separate things. So that's why when we would do this, we would only do it. In fact, the proposed language says local elections will be conducted as opposed to state elections. The wording that I put in here came from Amherst, I think. Not Hadley, but Amherst. And it proposes to do this, but also gives authority to make sure that it's implemented by the town clerk and by town bylaw so that we don't have a charter that gets so specific that you then have to come back when something technically needs to get changed. This is sort of the general process, and then the bylaw implements it.
That makes sense.
Looks to me like the ballots could potentially get pretty complicated. Has there been any analysis of invalid ballots through this process?
Yeah, there has been. That's a legitimate concern. Fortunately, we have all the data now and experience that we're not seeing high rates of residual votes or of spoiled ballots. We're seeing it pretty much on par with regular plurality elections. The voting machines today are pretty sophisticated, and they normally, I don't know if
I'm not worried about the machines, I'm worried about...
No. Well, what I'm saying, the reason I'm bringing that up is today, if you were to vote for multiple candidates in a race that you're not supposed to, the machine spits it back to you. Under ranked choice, it catches all these things and says, it'll spit it back and say, you made a mistake here, you can have another go.
But to that point, if you again have a position that you're filling that you need to pick two people, how does that affect the...
So I'm assuming that this is the discussion Nathan and I had, is that you've got two vacancies on a position. You want, for two vacancies...
You want to elect two people.
Elect two people.
Yeah.
You want both of them to have more than 50%.
If you want both of them to have more than 50%. There's a couple ways to do it. One is to elect them proportionally, and that is the point of this section of the report on increasing, what says RCV promotes fair representation. So there is a belief among some that if you have, let's say you took a public that was the voters who were divided, kind of 51% and 49, 51% in one camp, 49% in another camp, and you were electing, say, 4 people at a time. The 51% could vote for their 4 people, and the 49% could vote for their 4 people. And in the way we vote today, which is usually called block voting or plurality at large voting, you vote for the 4 you like the best, that slim majority can get 100% of the seats. And the argument is that that's unfair, that really what you'd like to see is roughly half and half, maybe 2 and 2 or 3 and 1, that the voters should be represented in proportion to their beliefs. So normally ranked choice voting, when it's implemented in a multi-winner situation, does give you that kind of proportional result. So if you're electing two at a time and the public is kind of divided, it's basically going to wind up with one from one camp and one from the other camp. There are different ways to do it, where you could, if you wanted to, achieve the result where that majority gets 100% of the seats. Most people think that's not desirable, but it's an option that's out there.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So I think another way of putting this is depending on what the town's values are around, do they want to have these town bodies reflected proportionally, or do they prefer that each position be elected with the support of the majority? Whichever way the values go, there's a way to do ranked choice voting, which will eliminate the problem of strategic voting, eliminate the problem of vote splitting and spoiler problems, that they can implement and still see whatever value they want, majority-based or kind of proportional-based. One thing that's interesting, proportional is kind of a new concept to a lot of people, and because it's not part of our statewide campaign, outside of local context, we don't talk about it a lot. What's interesting about it to me for Lunenburg, if I were to explain it to someone in Lunenburg, the question I would ask yourself is that better or worse reflect our values than proportional? I know that my sense is that people in Lunenburg really value town meeting. They believe that's kind of a very sacred institution. And I think the interesting thing about proportional representation, one argument you could make for it, and I'm not trying to suggest you should go one way or the other, but one of the things about town meeting is whoever wants to show up comes and gets their voice heard, and everybody is sort of involved in the deliberation. If you think about the Board of Selectmen as a body who in some sense, conceptually, is sort of executing the town's will in between town meeting, proportional representation may be a vehicle for helping achieve that similar range of perspectives, in between the town meeting, so to speak. There's other arguments that could be made on the majoritarian side, that there's more cohesive way of governing and that sort of thing. But
Does this require new equipment when we have elections?
My understanding is that Lunenburg, the model of voting machine you have, and I would like to actually clarify this with the town clerk, would probably not support it right now, and that you would either have to, the model voting machine you have, it's called the AccuVote, I believe you have, it's called the AccuVote. You're not the only community in the state with it, but it's a very old voting machine. It is not up to federal guidelines for security and a number of other things, and it's really, in my view, all the communities in the state that have this old model should be upgrading to one of the two latest models that are the only two currently that are in production that are approved by the Secretary of State. And if you were to upgrade your voting machines anyway, you would thereby have the ability to do ranked choice, because all the modern machines that are approved by the Secretary of State do support it.
It's on the capital plan.
It is on the capital plan?
She's bringing it to the town.
Oh, good, okay.
How much do voting machines cost?
No idea. She hasn't gone yet.
They're about $5,000 a piece.
So 4 precincts.
4, maybe you have an extra one, so 20,000, 25,000.
You can't use one machine and then just tag it. This one on that side, that one on that side. I'm just... Here, we put this in the charter, but we don't have the machines.
Yeah, we know.
Well, so then at that point, the capital plan comes up, and then in 5 or 6 years, we finally get the machines, and then it's finally implemented, so to speak, on a trial or in a limited basis as it works its way up, because it's an educational process when you change that.
So just technically, the way the proposal says, provisions shall be specified by a bylaw. So doing the charter says we shall, but it doesn't happen until you actually do a bylaw, so you have an additional time. to
So
say-
we don't have to, it doesn't have to be implemented once the charter is approved.
Right,
That was basically my question. But it's there.
right.
If we do not upgrade the voting machines for 25 years,
I think we have to.
well, I think eventually the federal government will, or someone will
Well,
say.
aren't they going
"Oh,
to bring a ballot question? I thought I read articles that it was going to be a ballot question, that they were going to try to get this,
Oh, that we were going to try to...
yeah.
Right
For the
now,
state.
that's not, the organization right now is
Yeah.
pursuing right now a legislative strategy
Okay.
and trying to get a bill passed. Bill may be difficult to get passed, but
Okay.
they normally are, especially for electoral reform. For good and bad reasons, but
Must have happened.
so if the legislative strategy doesn't pan out, we may be looking at other options that may include a ballot question.
And just the other point, as we've talked about what we're going to do at the town meeting in May, is that this provision would be a separate article. We will be coming up with what we're recommending for the charter as a whole. We're going to have one that's non-controversial typographical, type of grammatical errors, non-substantive changes, substantive changes that we don't think are controversial will probably be bundled together, and then anything that's controversial or an important thing, we will put it separately. So this would be
So
one
if there were 3 controversial things,
we'd have 3 different articles.
we'd have 3 different ones, and people could say, we'd like to put 1 and 2 together,
But not,
3.
yeah.
Yep.
And that, okay,
So
good, thank you.
then it gives people the ability to, because we found this out in the last hearing process, is that it's not an all or nothing. So we're not going to make something go down because somebody didn't like one provision or the other.
Okay. All right, so on the proposed new section, there's, general provisions for ranked choice elections shall be specified by bylaw, provided, however, that a voter's lower ranked choice shall not impact the likelihood of a voter's higher ranked choice being elected. What does that mean?
That means if you vote for your second choice, it doesn't hurt your first choice. So when you vote for when you're electing multiple people today, when you vote for your second choice under the system you have today, you vote for your second choice, it hurts the chance your first choice may be elected. That second choice may beat your first choice. We have concisely defined ranked choice voting to mean you rank them in order of preference, and however it's counted, you must ensure that the second choice doesn't hurt the first choice.
Okay,
You
so-
vote for A and B, because you like A, and B you're kind of good with, right?
Yep.
B doesn't get voted in because B got only 2% of the votes. Your A still gets in.
Okay.
Someone else votes A and C, and that wins.
Okay.
Under this one, your A gets in, because that was the first round. And in the second round, if your B would then be assigned somewhere, but then you would lose your A.
Yeah.
You were the lowest rank.
Yeah.
No, if
You're the fourth
A had the most number the first time,
Yeah.
it stays there.
Those votes stay there.
Yeah.
Then you take the lowest rank's second
Yep.
vote. So your A vote, you vote for A.
I know, but say my B vote goes to C, who was basically, so we had a 40-35 and,
Your B vote would go, oh,
what, it could?
So here's, I guess the simple way to look at this is if we look at the examples where there's multiple candidates competing for one office,
Yeah,
and you ranked the multiple candidates, right?
yeah.
On your ballot, we don't look at your second choice
Because my first choice was already taken.
until your first choice is
Okay.
eliminated,
Right,
right?
okay.
So your second choice can
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
hurt your first choice.
Got it.
It's
Unless it's
it's
one-
saying we don't want the bullet voting incentive.
Okay.
There's all different ways, we could have listed out like a whole, we could have written a lot of text to say this is what ranked choice voting is and this is how it's counted.
Yep.
But if you give that property, you say it's ranked and you give that property that bullet voting is not in your interest to do, you basically defined ranked choice voting.
Okay. I just find it confusing language to put in there.
Well, I will say that we pulled this from another town. Town council has not opined on this, and whether we can make this easier to read and understand, we can certainly do that for maybe
And we could work with you with other
Yeah,
language
yeah,
too.
so.
Yeah.
Other comments? So we're not going to take a vote, but does anyone, I'm doing the negative again, not want to present this to the voters as a separate proposal?
I could go either way. There's a piece of me that thinks that it's going to be very confusing if it's not already also initiated statewide.
Yeah.
Just because you're going to have people going in there with some of them they have,
Ranked choice vote.
and some of them they don't. Unless you don't do that on the same ballot.
Not on the same
Right.
day.
It's never
Because
on,
local
Not
and
on the
state are
same-
never on
well,
the same
it could be
ballot.
on the same day. You could have a
Right.
town election at the same time as a state
You
election.
do that?
We don't tell
I'm not sure.
But it's a separate ballot, so that's part of the issue.
Mr. Chair, I'm just not sure we want to take the lead on the education process. I mean, I certainly believe it would be fine to leave it up to the voters, but it would be much, in my opinion, it would be much better to have the state or someone else educate the voters on what it is, and then at some point in the future say, do we want it? As opposed to being on the bleeding edge of, 10 towns to do it, and we have to confuse our people and go through all the education process. I'm not sure it's that important to us to do that. That's just my opinion.
I would agree with that. I'm not opposed to it, but I don't know that it's a big enough issue in our town to get at the forefront of it and really help drive it. As it gains more acceptance, I'd be more receptive to it.
You know, when I look at it as, this is going to have people who know they may not be the most popular choice, say, you know what, I'm going to put my hat in the ring, and I'm going to work really hard, because I have a shot. Does that make sense? Because, as you said, everyone's voting for you, but I have a shot, because if you put me down as your second choice, I have a shot at getting in. And there are some people, I think, who don't go for office. It's the same three people. I'm never going to win, so why bother? And people do go
Yeah.
against it. But see, I see it, probably the glass is half full, half empty, you know how that works.
And what may happen is I often
I see
say,
that full, so I'm not sure.
I
what that
see it was
means.
delicious on the way down.
the other thing is that when people look at when you're running for office, I often say somebody's running for this time, but they're really running for the next time. So it gives them experience in running and learning and other things like that. People get to hear their message. They say, I like your message, but I really like this one now. Next year when there's a vacancy or something, I may do it. So you get tested in the electoral process as well. I mean, the vote of choice, as was mentioned, they are focusing on statewide. They're not focusing on towns. Some various towns have done it. I could go either way, too.
I can only think of a few elections in the time that I've been here that this would even come into play.
Both times I ran. Jamie and I both ran. There were 3 candidates running. When Phyllis
For me too.
I was going
ran,
to say, it happened in the school committee.
school
Both
committee,
times
it
I ran.
actually happens more than you realize. And I wouldn't begin to predict who those third candidates would have gone for.
Right.
And how it would have shifted around, because Lunenburg politics are, some of it's conservative, liberal, but it's like, center of town versus another part of the town. It's this person who's lived here a long time, hasn't lived here a life. I don't like what they said at town meeting last year versus what they said. Lots of people vote different things, but I like the part of the civility. I like the fact that in a debate, which our debates are actually very civil because Tim makes sure they're civil, but it keeps that civility perhaps on Facebook. It perhaps keeps it at a point where, I can only hope, but people say, can you believe what this person said? Don't vote for them as number 1 or number 2. That could make a difference when you're saying, I like the way your graphic was knocking on that door when I drove through Concord today. Vote no on number 1, vote yes on number 1. Neighbors across the street. Do they talk to each other when they're in their front yard? I don't know. Okay, so we're not going to take a position at the moment. It wouldn't surprise me we may hold it off at this point, but I think this is now recorded. It's going to be publicized around the town. It gets the word out there, but we're not going to take an official vote tonight of whether we're going to move forward or not. But I appreciate your coming out, giving us the materials, a very succinct one. I saw the presentation that was done for Congresswoman Tsongas last month, trying to look at it at the federal level of trying to do this, because this really is an exciting thing about doing things differently.
Thanks a lot for inviting us
Yeah,
out.
thank you.
It was a lot of fun coming to talk to you guys today.
Feel free to reach out to me with any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night. I gotta make it in time for the Red Sox.
Yeah. What time do they start?
8
Okay, we have our focus time. Discuss special town meeting vote report. I'll draft up a very simple report which basically talks about, we had the previous draft, went to public hearing. We went to public hearing knowing that a lot of things were not going to make it through the process. And then, as a result of comments, we actually heard those. We've gone back. We are simplifying the process. The question becomes, when I looked at the schedule, and unfortunately because I didn't post the meeting in time because of the Columbus Day holiday, we haven't had an opportunity to take official votes on a lot of things, but we have simplified some things, taking out the town accountant from town manager's appointment, keeping that with the selectmen, simplifying some other things. So I could take a stab at writing up a report and getting that to everybody with the idea that we would have a meeting. Yeah, it would be the night after if we're going to meet. So since I would ask, I will draft it based on what the minutes have been doing, and I'll send it out to everybody, and you can let me know if I've captured what we're doing. We're not going to deliberate, but we're going to only report out on what we've done. So I think I will get that report out, if not by the end of this week, the beginning of next week, so we'll have it a week before special town meeting. And we'll give the general time frame for public outreach and other things like that, if that's okay.
Then this document that you sent to us?
Yes.
Is the public able to see that document, or is that just we're using it?
Any of these documents are always public.
I just want to make sure.
I'm not ready to post it on the website as where we are, because we haven't, it was my attempt to capture what we've talked about, so we actually haven't reviewed it.
But I was thinking, like with the town moderator, you know how we rewrote some of that, I was going to show Tim.
Yes,
to
yes.
make sure
I was going to talk about how we read out to other meetings.
I'm ahead of you.
No, this is good. See, we're going to get out of here for the game. Well, and actually, why don't we go to that? So, let's see. Steve, did you talk with Cemetery Commission?
I did, and I can give you a bit of a report,
Okay.
not to go into any great, I don't know how much detail I can go into. They are working to rewrite Section 35B. They thank you for, if you go to that, I can tell you exactly what, let's see, I know I have it there somewhere too. That's, if I hit it right, did I write it down right? I don't even know what page it's on. 35B.
I have it on 8.
It is, see, I was using an old version.
Oh, okay.
So is it 3.8?
No,
No,
it's 3.3.
page 8.
Oh, page
I have
8.
it
Oh,
on
I'm
page 8.
thinking.
Yeah.
On page 8? Oh, yeah, cemetery. If you go to page 9 then, it says powers and duties. They really like the soul. That is not a problem. They're having a lot of difficulty with the last sentence, the day-to-day care and maintenance of the cemetery shall be under the supervision of the town manager. I asked them, we had quite a lively discussion discussing what they wanted. They are going to try to rewrite that and get it to you, and their thought was so that the lawyer could look at it, because I expressed concern that as a commission, as elected commission, do they have, what is their legal authority under Massachusetts law as opposed to a town manager who is hired? Does that make sense? there might be a separation, which brought us to section 42I. 42I.
Which is town manager's power and duties.
Yes, 42, and 9 outside. 42I, page I. It says here, was it not H?
Yep.
To have, accept property under the control of the school committee, the library trustees, and the conservation commission. I brought that up to them saying, you're concerned about being, overseeing the cemetery properties. That has to be rewritten also. I advised them that they had to look at 42I, because I told them our goal was to have this, the charter flow so that the flow of who's in charge of what and duties is the same for elected people as opposed to hired people, and whatever differences are there because of state law. Does that make sense?
Yep. So,
we spent a lot of time discussing that, what's the difference between, and I'm not an expert, I tried to guide them in what we had discussed in the overall thing, and they are trying to get together to rewrite those two. So you might expect them to ask 42I to add cemetery commission in there.
okay.
And then basically it's rewriting that last sentence.
So just to point on that 42I, I realized I need to take out the words library trustees because the town facility property is now maintained by under the town manager. So two things regarding authority. Per town council, various boards and commissions have authority. If we put something in the charter, the town adopts it and the legislature votes it, that changes the state law. So
the charter supersedes the
state law if it says something different, unless it's regarding that department's specific duties. So the original charter that took the responsibility for maintenance of parks, cemeteries, sewer came later, was a particular vote of the town to centralize management of town facilities and to save money. So some of it was so that's a different.
So that's why I said I did not know what the legal, and I didn't know, and they did say that charter supersedes, and I said yes, I believe it does. But I know, like when you're talking about employees, there's federal guidelines that supersede a lot of things, I would assume.
Not for supervision.
Or well, but for certain procedures. Or flow.
Well, there's federal and state law that the town manager is responsible to enforce.
Right. But there are certain things that are, and I'm not, so I tried to give them the gist of everything, and basically came down to those were probably the two things. They like the soul, which is in the general law, Mass General Law.
Which came from them to change that.
But they were not happy with the ending.
Which we didn't put in, that's existing.
Right.
And bear in mind, we're looking at an existing charter and what should be changed and why should it be changed. Just because they desire to have some authority that they don't currently have doesn't mean it's appropriate to give it to them.
Right, and I explained to them that they needed to contact Bob, get on the agenda, and to be available to answer specifically why they wanted it to change to whatever they wanted to change to.
Right.
They're still figuring that out. They did ask when the meetings were. I said, these are the approximate meetings, and when you came out with the agenda, I immediately emailed the Cemetery Commission and said, part of the thing says reports from any town official boards, commissions. So you are officially can come to any of our meetings as long as that is there, correct?
Yep.
Because they are a commission. And I figured that also told me I needed to give a cemetery update.
Good.
Which I did. There you go.
We didn't decide it last time, but would somebody be willing to talk to the town moderator about the section for the town moderators? Okay, great, thank you. Just to let you know what I did do, which I didn't put it out there for deliberation, but in the town manager hiring committee, the discussion we had by adding a person that the moderator asked that was a voter that was not on any town board or committee would have made it an even number committee, which we're not allowed to have within the charter. So I actually added another member to make it even, because we were trying to figure out, do we take his vote away and all this other stuff? So I just added one, and so when you talk to him and say, we may have made the committee 2 people more, which is difficult to get everybody together, but understand it has to be an odd number, and does this work for him for what he was trying to do to get more public
So,
involvement?
may I send him this document?
Yes.
And ask him specifically to look at the town moderator sections, which you can search and do?
Yeah.
And does that meet?
The town moderator and the town manager appointment process, because he's mentioned there as opposed to under the town moderator. Because I also wasn't entirely clear what we were supposed to do on the deputy or the assistant town manager, so when I looked at my notes, and even looking at Michael's notes, I didn't know what we needed for language, so I want to punt it back to you, to him, to say, all right, what does he really want to do? Because the assistant town manager, when he's not there, the appointment process, to make sure that it was consistent on that.
And just on that point, I understand the moderator's reluctance, but it's, nobody knows what the date's going to be. I think he can appoint an assistant, and it just gives you one more person to check calendars with, and there's a certain amount of flexibility on when we have special town meetings. I don't think the reason for not appointing one is all that strong.
Right.
Right. So I will have him check town, all right, go ahead, keep going, I'm all right.
Who do you have on what role
Sorry?
to the appointing committee?
You had 2.
Two people.
Two people
At
that are not-
At large.
The moderator can appoint,
Yeah.
the moderator.
Okay.
So citizens at large.
Just citizens at large, not...
that are not
Just
members
2
of the-
town registered voters who are not a member of any committee.
Okay.
Oh, good, they're registered.
Yeah, but that good.
Yes, we love that.
Actually, I'm not seeing why it has to be an odd number.
If you go to multi-member board at the end, which is...
Should be. It's not a tie.
Section 7-8, procedures of multi-member bodies.
7-8.
G, all multiple member, when established, shall be composed of an odd number of members. The theory being is that way you'll never have ties.
Yep.
It's not a number of odd members.
We probably should put that on the talent thing application. Are you an odd member? Would you like to be the odd
Just
member?
ranked choice voting in the,
Oh, there, ranked choice voting on that.
Our school committee meeting last week,
Yes.
the language in 3.331,
Yeah,
instead of
Finally.
select or elect, we chose appoint,
Appoint, okay.
because that's what we do.
because that's what we do.
That's what the letter, it's a letter of appointment.
Yes.
Okay.
I thought that's what we...
We had, but they had never
Select,
they
yeah.
never voted it.
They never,
Yeah, we never approved it.
So now it's approved,
But now
right?
it's approved, voted for.
Forward.
So the other thing that
Yeah.
we discussed under that section 7-8, procedures of multi-member bodies, we were talking about filling vacancies, about if the appointing authority was sitting on things and doesn't do anything. I added the language in saying, so it reads now, "If the expiration of 30 days following the delivery of such notice to the appointing authority that there's a vacancy, and there is a pool of candidates available, said officer or multi-member body has not appointed some person, the remaining members of the multi-member body shall fill the vacancy." Because we went to the 30-day could go away, but there was nobody there for applying for it. So why should it go back to them? We really should try to keep it with the multi.
well, I think part of the discussion.
What number is
really-
that? Just
Page 24.
on that page.
Uh,
Let's see.
7-8
Okay.
G.
I think
No,
F.
part of the concern was the whole 30-day notion and whether or not you wanted time to post.
Okay, so we may want to look at that.
And I think that was one of Heather's concerns. But my concern was, when do you get it back?
I mean, when does it go back to the committee?
Like, so say we don't make an appointment as a finance committee for the seat that was left vacant because the finance committee appointing committee didn't appoint. So So say, like maybe there's a pool, but we decide we don't want to pick anybody from the pool. And maybe that's why you guys sat on it. I don't know.
So,
Can we put something in there that says, after notifying, I like the words you added, Bob, and there's a pool of candidates available, said officer or multiple member body has not appointed some persons to fill. The remaining members of the multiple member body shall, after notifying the whatever, fill such vacancy. Because sometimes it's just, I know that you notified them when it was a vacancy, but then if it sat for 3 months and nobody did anything.
Yeah, I want them to do something, but it's like, okay, so we get it. Now we have the appointing authority. How long do we have the appointing authority?
before it goes back to the thing. 'Cause
And
if they
there's a
took
snow
40
day in your meeting,
Yeah.
Yeah,
January last year for us.
yeah.
We had a couple-
See, I'm not attributing any
I just-
malice to this process.
No,
It's
no,
kind
no.
of, it's kind of scheduling, it's who forgot it.
No, I understand. So I'm just trying to make it cleaner that, and I'm just saying that, like as a committee member, I don't want it.
Right, so
So
what
I
I'm
might
saying
get
is,
that.
maybe there's a flag that if it's been, when you get to this point, instead of just appointing, you get one more shot to notify them and say, we're going to appoint if you don't appoint.
Oh, so we can threaten you,
Yeah, something like
but
that.
we can't do it.
Well, you can do it.
If they don't respond.
Right.
I mean, the other simplest thing is just take it out and just say it's always with the appointing authority.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why this was added at that point. I don't think this has ever been, I don't think anybody knew about it for the most part. I don't
Right.
think anybody
Well, I think,
exercised
but
it.
I also think that the difference is that it's not a standing committee, and I think
Right.
that that's what makes, like, for our committee hard. I don't know about, like other situations that come up.
I'll also ask town council if he has a suggestion on this one as well.
But yeah, I just feel, I just feel like, yeah, I'm just going to pick somebody who I like. I don't, I'm not sure that that's necessarily a good representation of who should be on the committee.
The other thing I did, as I promised I would, is that change the library language back to what they asked for, but ordered it in the specific part is, so this is 3.7, library trustee B, powers and duties, it's all in purple. It's after the 4 bullets, last one, strategic planning. In the next paragraph, the last sentence, the library director will hire library employees. We originally had said the town manager will hire the employees. And so this one says, the library will hire employees, fix their salaries, define their duties, make rules concerning their tenure of office and discharge in accordance within the limits established by the town personnel bylaws, policies, procedures, and practices, any applicable collective bargaining agreements according to municipal policies. This may need to get cleaned up, but that tracks a little bit more of what Heather was looking for before we came up with the last language, because the last language that we put out for the hearing came from Labor Council, which was stronger. So I'm going to send this to the town manager has not had a chance to review or comment on this section.
My quick comment?
Yep.
In my discussions with various people, I like the bottom there where it says the responsibility and governance of the library board cover these specific areas: legal, policymaking, financial governance, strategic planning. I think that really says this is your job, and I'm wondering, is that what we're looking for in all the commissions,
Well,
or is it just for library? I just wanted some clarification.
so that came from the library. I'm not sure that gives them any more authority than...
Nope, I'm not saying it gives any more, but does it explain the purpose of an elected commission or an elected board as opposed to...
So the
someone
only
else?
question that I have is the word legal, because there are some things that town council are involved with that the
Right.
various committees
But
don't.
Then
Policy
I
making,
like-
I've got no strategic plan, I have no problem with financial governance, subject to budget limits and stuff like that, so...
Which actually should,
But are we looking to do that, it's kind of that separation of people who hire and work with people as opposed to people who oversee general gestalt policies, guidance.
Although library trustees is different, same as
Okay.
school.
That's
They're
what I
the
wanted to ask.
same in the category, because they've always been a statutory different,
Mhm.
and we've not chosen to take it back.
But in those bullets, it doesn't say they hire people. The bullets don't say hire people.
Right. that's-
Later on, part of what we have given them, because they're on the library, they have, like, school committee has special and all that. But I'm just wondering if that's, might simplify some of the things in some of the other places where people are trying to figure out where their powers, where the jurisdictions are. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah.
do we not want to do that because it's really splitting hairs?
Do you want a bullet point, for example, cemetery commission? These are things that you're responsible for in the cemetery.
Well, but I'm thinking, it's not just cemetery,
Well,
but it's
as-
all the other commissions
Right,
too,
as an example.
specifically.
So
I don't want to single anyone out.
so it's bullet points
Could be.
to...
But even if it's a general at the beginning, you know, under what, commissions will be governed under these unless specified otherwise. When I've talked to different people, even outside the cemetery, sometimes they're not quite sure what they actually do
Yep.
specifically. And over the years, it's a small town, people just do whatever needs to be done.
So that's when I forwarded this draft to the town manager and to town council. The language that we agreed to take out of the cemetery, the parks, and the sewer, which was basically saying they're not supposed to be, they're only supposed to be general policy. That went further than we intended, and it did not clarify the language of the day-to-day. So I just took it out and basically saying we're sidestepping the communication issue. Because I don't know that we can come up with how do we improve that communication.
And that's the other issue, is that part of the charter to have it that specific in here?
Right. And
So-
and I would say it shouldn't, and if somebody can come up with language that clarifies day-to-day is under the town manager and everything else is others, and what's the difference in the charter, give it to me and we can put it in there, but if we can't come up with anything, we shouldn't try to change it.
Okay. And I agree with you, but I saw that and I said, oh, there's an attempt at maybe trying to figure out how to get it in.
Yeah, but just,
Okay.
as is true with writing resumes, when you write the word legal, what's that mean?
Well, I'll take the word...
It should be a sentence. What are you intending? You
Right.
make the decision you're going to defend the lawsuit when you get sued for an employment claim?
Well, the legal bullet I can understand, but
Yeah.
I'm looking at, I like the concept of it. These are the general
Yeah.
things that you're in charge of.
Well, I almost would give that challenge to the other side of this argument as well, though. You know, they were obviously looking for something at the public hearings, and if they can't come up with something that makes it more specific,
Yeah.
they should agree we're going to leave it out.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I don't want to make it
And
we
and with the
may.
cemetery
but-
commission, I discussed the fact, I said, I cannot write this for you. Give us what you want, we'll discuss it and tell us
Right.
why. But we're not writing everyone's, your section's under review, the sewer section, the town manager's under review, the school committee's under review. You tell us what you would like changed, and then we kind of go, well, yes, no, and then present it from there. But you're right.
We shouldn't go fishing for changes
Right.
that nobody has ever thought about until just now.
Right.
Because we asked them to, oh, wow, I'd like to change that, I'd like to change... If it hasn't been a problem,
Right.
we shouldn't be seeking out change for the sake of change.
No, but we were supposed to talk to every board, and, you know, when you talk to boards, some of them have said, yeah, it's fine. Some of them I've talked to said, yeah, that's not a problem.
Yeah.
And some have very specific concerns, and I've been trying to tell people, then you need to write it out, give it to us, preferably before January. And I used last year as an example, that we had 2 meetings canceled because of snow.
So the other thing that I did is, as I said, we agreed to take out the town accountant from the appointment by the town manager. I also took out director of facilities, just because the town manager can create that position. If we want to do it, we can add it back in. That was it made people, it doesn't exist now, so therefore they created a budgetary thing. Let's not create it in there. They can have that later, so try
And if
to...
the town manager decided to add that, it's not a charter issue.
Right.
Okay.
So other than that, this was sent out to you on Monday, so you didn't have a lot of time to look at it. I'm not going to ask for a vote, but any other comments on it?
Can I have a clarification?
Sure.
I read through it, and it's the town clerk elected or appointed, because at one point it says elected, and another section, 42C, it says, if elected, must be a resident within 6 months. It was my understanding that if you're running for an office, you need to be a member of the town, and that made me look to see if other language was changed.
So this is, 42C is the appointment powers of the town clerk. So if the town clerk stayed elected, this language pulls out.
Thank you. Do you see why? And then I went through looking to see if maybe something else was changed in there and I missed it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Any other clarifying questions? Comments?
I do like the idea of presenting it in layers
Yeah.
at town meeting. I think that'll be nice.
Okay. I don't have any specific things on the schedule other than we're behind. Because I was looking at some notes that we were supposed to take some vote in October, which would have been the last meeting, but I don't know. I think we've got a lot here, but we still need more information. We originally talked about having a public hearing the last week of November, which we still could. So our next meeting would be November 14th, and we could invite, if need be, the town moderator and cemetery.
If it's a public hearing, we'd need advance notice and publish it in the ledger. And
Right.
I don't think there'd be sufficient time if we meet on the 14th
No.
to have a meeting the last week of November. We could move it to the first week of December, perhaps.
And just so you know, I did look at a lot of calendar dates. We can meet December 5th, right? Do we do the first and third?
We do the second and fourth.
Which would be December 12th. The fourth one is December 26th, which I assume no one's going to meet. And Halloween is the 28th, which would be the 4th. And that's another one I'm not quite sure.
Not Halloween, Thanksgiving.
I mean, no,
What are you
Thanksgiving.
talking
Yeah,
about?
the 21st of November is the night before Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Assuming- I'm sorry, I'm looking
Okay.
at multiple things here.
So let's talk about the public hearing on the 12th
Of December?
of December.
Would that be at Town Hall?
Probably, but we need to find out, maybe at the school, depending where there's a ZBA hearing.
But I specifically looked at November and December because if people don't get to us by December 12th with major changes, we cannot guarantee
Right.
stuff. Because January, we have to have stuff in.
Although we did talk about having a second public hearing the week of January 23rd. So therefore, we could make changes between then and the next time, although we want to try to get everything up front. And then, Board of Selectmen, we're going to be talking about February 13th, the week of that week. And we talked about our last vote being March 13th, because the warrant closes the next week.
Right.
So we do have a little bit, but the goal should be, we really should be done by the end of November.
With the major things.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Subject to
brown,
word-
the brown and some of the brown and purple. I mean,
The bruising, yeah.
you know, those aren't, well, it's the red stuff. We need to make a decision, yes, no,
Yep.
going or not,
Well, I
not
think-
waste time on things that aren't going to happen anyway.
We had also talked at the last meeting about having people try to start to put together
Oh, the-
So-
Like a ballot, the
Yeah, the-
ballot thing.
Yeah.
So
The yes, no,
Jamie and
right?
Michael are working on,
Is he still part of this?
Yeah,
I
he's
saw
sick
him the other
tonight.
day, and he was.
Yeah.
I saw him.
Yeah, that's why he did the minutes. He said, I was coughing, I interrupted, he's getting sick. I said, please share the minutes, and that's it. So he agreed to that.
Got life insurance.
No.
You think there's a problem down here?
Yeah. When do you want that for? What's the... You want
probably-
one shot by the 14th?
Yeah, the 14th, yeah. Is there anything else that we thought needed pro and con besides town clerk? Oh, Board of Selectmen. Which one are you working on?
Select-
I'm not doing either.
Select board, right?
I thought you volunteered to do one for
No.
or something.
Did I? Well, I don't
What do
need
you
to do the town clerk.
All right, town clerk, that's...
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Do you have anybody who wanted to do pro or con for the select board?
I think Jamie's doing it.
Michael.
Michael,
Michael.
Jamie just said he wasn't.
That's okay.
That's a way to volunteer something.
Yeah.
The FCC, whoever's here.
Info.
You may fall into it.
I'll
Because
talk to Michael.
And
those are pretty much the only two real
No, I think
contracts.
that really is. So this, unless somebody wants to take a look, you all received this in the mail with the
Yes.
pro-con type
Yes.
thing, so that format is what we'd be looking
Yes.
at. And we don't like that. We're not taking a vote, but we probably won't go through with the ranked choice vote thing. And I don't know if anyone has any, I don't think we have any major issues with the voting of the minimum thing, so that probably won't need a pro or con either, so we really simplified things. The big issue will be if somebody's...
Should there be an explanation of the rank? Not the rank, the change in
The minimum vote.
minimum vote,
Yeah,
just
that-
an explanation.
Yeah.
A little clearer than this
Sample.
legally.
A little clearer than
And
the
it's
legal
Like,
is.
like layman's,
The layman's
Right,
version.
right, because that,
That is, I
Oh
mean,
my
to me,
God.
I just say run-on sentence.
the average Facebook user may not be able to interpret that.
Is there an average Facebook?
I'm being recorded, so it'll be nice.
There is
Okay.
front
That's
of
like
me,
me.
so they can just hear
I'm getting
me.
skinnier, so I won't be behind me that much longer.
Oh, you got it.
No, I just have
So our
purposely, I
next
say,
meeting
"Oh, see
is
this?"
Tuesday, November 14th.
That's a Wednesday.
Yes.
Yes, or I thought you said Tuesday.
That's
You didn't think I did. That's why I always say both,
Okay.
so that somebody catches it. Wednesday, November 14th.
I will not be here.
Okay.
It's Field Hockey Banquet night. Hopefully we'll go far in districts, but who knows?
Does anyone have anything else?
And golf banquet night as well. Okay. I will.
Lots of work.
Okay.
Anything else from the commission?
Yeah, I will, okay.
And will we adjourn?
Did you want to...
What would you want to
We
do?
haven't approved the minutes from September 12th.
No, he said we didn't have enough time to read them.
Yeah.
We just got
They
them.
came out 15 minutes in advance.
Yeah, I haven't read them.
All right.
I haven't read them.
We technically could, but I got halfway through and I said, oh boy, this is, we really did the technical stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
And please look at that.
All right.
Okay,
So we
all
did
those in
that.
favor of adjourning?
Bye.
Thank you. 8:20.